Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is May 27, 2022. We want to thank Rob Grant's amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything, and Tamar's great friend Richard for helping us get rid of all the tech problems. And here we are. Tamar Rogoff, it is a pleasure and an honor to be with you. Where are you calling in from?
I'm from Lower East Side, New York City.
How cool is that? First question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
Well, the obvious answer would be love, and I'll stick with that. Would you like
That
me
is fine. I
to?
love that answer, and I get that a lot. That's a commonality of people,
uh,
rejoicing in one word that summarizes how we want to be.
yeah, I mean, I might say connection, but one would have to say positive, good connection, good communication, and love.
It's beautiful. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
For me, it's through the body. I'm a person who's learned directly from the body, kind of made a lifetime study of being aware in my body and receptive, and is my greatest friend. So I've been teaching classes for years, my laboratory, and I've developed something called body scripting, which I use as a choreographer, which I am, and a filmmaker, and I that's how I receive information, through my senses. That's the strongest.
It's beautiful. And why do you think humans collect or gather information?
I think to be more comfortable, to be more awake, to be more stimulated, to be more secure.
And do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
I think it's innate. I think it's survival.
Do thoughts create emotions?
Um, Certainly, yeah. I mean, a lot of things create emotions, but thoughts can certainly influence emotions.
I I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
Mostly till I feel it.
Till you feel it. That's amazing. So your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings? I know it's both and it depends, but just your hunch.
Well, I think we're basically feeling beings.
Yeah. Can humans think without language?
Definitely.
Chomsky says that a language is not just words, it's a culture, a tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work, when language breaks down?
I go physical.
That's good.
Best way to end any argument.
But suss out what you mean by go physical. What does that mean?
I think when language breaks down, there's a lot of fear involved, and a lot of insecurity, a lot of having the rug pulled out from under you and somehow not being supported. I think touch is grounding and affirming. Um, I don't know. I'm not sure I'm answering your
No,
question.
no, you answered it well. Touch is affirming. A couple months ago, I asked someone, "What do you do when language breaks down?" He said, "Group hug."
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, not all language is affirming. I think, I think we're assaulted by many things, and it depends on, kind of what your nervous system is, and how people receive information differently, and what's more open, what's more closed. but I mean, I think for in the most basic level, trust is really important for communicating,
Yeah.
and my father was a doctor of rheumatoid arthritis, and he always held his patient's hand as he did the interviews. The first interview with the patient, he always held their hands, and he, was sort of he would get a reading on the tension and all these things, but it also make the connection on a level beyond language, and so
Really beautiful. I mean, when you said that, it touched my hand. It would really, even though we're not physically in front of each other, just the idea that a doctor would hold the patient's hand is
yeah,
amazing. Beautiful. So these two questions are from Alan Turing, 1950s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
yes,
His second question is, can machines think?
no.
Very good.
That's my orientation. Um,
That's very, very good. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I would say meaning, um, because how would one pursue happiness? Well, I would pursue happiness through meaning. I don't. I'd have to link the two.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I got it from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He says, meaning usually lasts, happiness doesn't.
yeah.
So
Happiness is more of a byproduct.
it's a byproduct. Yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
I would say, let's see. Um, I always think about it like brain to cell and cell back to brain. So it's kind of a loop. Um, so I think we're creating consciousness, but all the channels are there ready. Um, we need focus. Um, we kind of need, in order to, let me think, because this is hard. This is harder language for me because I think in the body. I just say, I just think in the body.
Yeah.
So I try to think, and the body for me is a combination of my command center and my response center. So
Yeah.
I can command myself to lift my arm, but my arm, that's pretty meaningless unless my arm then gives me some feedback about its sensory connections lifting. And then, so I call that cell to brain. So then when this is, okay, so the command is lift your arm, and then comes, oh, feels tingly, it's a little bit cold, oh, this is interesting. And then what if, when I say what if, it goes back to the brain. What if I did this? And then, so that's a brain idea. And then, oh, this feels, then all sorts of things. So for me, that's how I think. This is actually how I think. Does that make any sense?
No, it made a lot of sense because I've had this little pain in my upper arm, my right arm,
Mhm.
and it only sort of pops up and it seems to be muscular once in a while, just very rarely. Like I threw the football for like 30 years and then COVID, I stopped. And then I thought, well, maybe the stopping caused this arm muscle to feel a little off just randomly sometimes.
Mhm.
So then I started throwing the football again because COVID sort of lowered and that my arm was fine. But still, every once in a while, I'll make a movement, and my arm will go and then I'll go, okay, we'll switch to the other arm, or it's like it goes back to my brain. So
Yeah.
then, I asked the doctor and they said, well, go see a physical therapist. And I'm like, well, I I sort of want to, but I figure stretching, yoga, what's going to cause that to shift that brain cell communication, my
Well,
think.
probably if you played a game with someone, you'd forget the whole thing.
Yeah,
Everyone else was involved. So
yeah,
your habitual pattern would override whatever's going on. So,
right.
but if you there's no harm in going to the physical therapist because you can just get some information. And probably what happened is you changed activities. And when you changed activities, things shifted, and probably what we're doing now, we do too much of. So, just being on our computers
Right.
and and having our hands in this position. And I think a lot of people have problems. But for me, what I would do, I'd put my hand on the place, I'd start moving what I call from the neighbors, which is not directly. I'd be moving my elbow or someplace further away, and I would do a kind of feeling tone diagnosis. So I would go, oh, when I lift my elbow, it feels great because I'm shortening it. When I lengthen my elbow, it hurts because I'm lengthening it. So I would have a whole way. That's why people want me to be their physical therapist, and I'm not that, but I do. It's really just your body knows, and you probably have all the tools you need um, just to try out a few things. Um, I think the body always has the answer. You know, we just have to know um, how to be, sort of experimental with it and try a few things out in a fun way. That's,
Well,
I,
that was good. I
I work
think,
with disabilities a lot. I mean,
yeah,
I've got disabilities in my dance class, and my film Enter the Fawn is about my work with the guy with cerebral palsy who became a dancer, um,
yeah.
who I taught to become a dancer, and the whole thing is about he was in pain all the time. And so we communicated body to body, like we were talking about before, bypassing the brain, because the brain was the problem. It's a neurological problem, cerebral palsy. The signal is a signal problem. But each cell has a brain. So we were bypassing that and going to a different part of the nervous system and changing his habitual patterns. And well, it was really, really very miraculous. So, but there's really always a reason for a pain, and you always have to listen to it.
That was the key. But the key word I got from you is listen to your body. Have
Yeah.
that sense of hearing or translating. And
And
I like,
get fascinated by if you're fascinated by the process. Well, if I put my arm like this, it doesn't hurt. If I go, oh, that's interesting. What if I flex my, that's interesting, and go around like that. And that's not fear based because we're often freezing out. When something hurts, we often just freeze it out. We don't even give it any circulation. We go, oh, that's bad. That hurts. Um, and so a lot of things are just about circulation, or the moment that you heard it, you're still holding on. Yeah, that's
yeah,
yeah.
that was really thorough. I'm sure we're going to delve deeper into everything you just brought up because it covers so much of what this discussion is about. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of light. I don't. I'm gonna pass a little bit. I don't know. I don't feel very much that thought is very speedy.
Yeah,
I,
that's all
I,
right.
I think it has a lot of twists and turns.
So Audre Lorde, the poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded and said you can if you expose the tools. The question is basically, what new tool do you suggest? But again, just because I open some of these questions with quotes, it doesn't mean you have to apply the quote. You can if you want. That's your choice. You put the question into the context you want, as well as with the word new. It's more like, what tool do you gravitate towards? And if you want to say it's a new one, or it's one I can use to dismantle the master's house, that's fine.
So she's discussing the brain.
Well, I think Audre Lorde is saying you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools, meaning there's something that is over us. It could be like what you've talked, fear, or it could be a ruler or a government, being, what we think of as a master. And so we have various tools.
What
So
I, what I would say, and I'm jumping in because I never remember the beginning of a sentence when you're on the end of the sentence. I'm very in the moment, so I have to keep up with you. Um, I I think that a habitual pattern is a kind of hold, right? A way that we're used to going and responding. And so what I do is I dismantle the whole thing and think about parts. So today in my class, which I teach on Zoom nowadays, we were talking about instigating movement from the pelvis. We go, and so I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at what occurs when you move instigated from the inner thighs, or from the sits bones, or from the hip bones, or from the buttock, or from behind the navel, or from the tailbone, or from the pubic bone. Okay, so I said, now I want you to instigate movement from all of those places. So for them, the clunk of the idea of the pelvis got broken down into resource parts. And that's total sabotage, because that says, wow, we're made of all these parts that have to work together, but we never think of it that way because we always let our pelvis, whatever. If sometimes you're thinking pelvis, sometimes you're thinking other parts of the body. But my approach is to understand the resources that go into the larger whole, and then to wake up dormant places that are not usually in the flow and see what they have to say. So
yeah, that's amazing. Would you say it's like what we call it? Pattern recognition leads to comprehensive awareness. If you study patterns, then you get the big picture.
Well, what I'm actually saying is if you break down patterns into like pieces and parts, and you do the same pattern, but with a different awareness of what actually is moving, then you are actually not doing the pattern. So in other words, if this camera is so crazy. Anyway, if you go like this, right? And
Right.
then you go, okay. But if you go the side of the hand, oh, the skin, you're watching it. Oh, there's the wrinkles of the skin, the veins, and you're actually at the source. You're investigating the source of what you think of as a pattern, a clunk. So you are thinking about what's the pattern of the pattern.
Yeah.
What's the pattern with each? I think that we tend to lump too many things together. Like we have a body, we have a chest. We don't have a chest. We have a heart that's embraced by lungs that has fluid in it. I mean, we tend to make boundaries and name things. I mean, just like who said Minnesota ends here and Wisconsin starts? I mean, it's land. grand.
Who said that? Who, really a lot of what you're saying is everything we study is we say this, or it really resonates with a lot. I appreciate what you're saying because there's another line, center without margins.
Hmm.
That it's a center, but it's not without margins. We think, well, the center is defined by margins. So this, you still break it down to parts, but it's an amazing thing that you flip. I'm curious. We might as well jump into it. How did you arrive at this? What's the roots of this?
Oh, well, I would say the roots of this is Martha Graham herself.
That is great. Wow.
That's what I would say. Because, as a kid, I was trained very early in ballet. And my mother took me to Martha Graham's studio. She revered her because she loved modern things. And she left me. I was 11 and I was there. And I went to the High School Performing Arts, the Fame School. And, well, I was really taught to be a little automaton Martha Graham's technique comes from Martha Graham's body. And it's very, very wonderful for her. And it's beautiful. And I don't, for her. But as a little kid, I had to put it on way too early. And every class was basically the same. I could do it for you in my sleep. I taught, and so I taught it for a while. So it's her sense of expression. So when I wanted to be a choreographer, I would rent the studio for a lot of money, and I would go in and I said, I better be efficient. I'm in the studio now. It's this much an hour, and I would want to choreograph, and I would say, okay, I'll do two-step draws, 2 Martha Graham this, 1 Martha Graham that, 1 this. Oh no, this would be really innovative. I'll do 3 Martha Graham this and 1 Martha Graham. And I'm like, and it just was like, I wasn't dancing or choreographing from any place that was mine. I was just by imitation, by constant repetition. These were the movements that I was taught from 11 years old to, I don't know, 18, 17. And, when I got to college, I for one credit, gym credit, I taught Martha Graham, So I was very distressed about the fact that I didn't really have my own language. And I left New York and I went to India and I became a classical Indian dancer. Was there for 3 years. I perfected it to the extent that, I really worked hard and I danced I lived in Varanasi, Benares, and I danced for all the tourists in the hotel. No one knew I was an Indian. And I learned a completely new approach to the body. It was just as codified, if not more, but it was different. So what it did was it wiped out Martha Graham, and in came this, 5,000-year-old art form that that basically only worked if you brought your whole spirit through it. And so that's how I got rid of Martha Graham. And then I was an Indian classical dancer in India. And I came back to New York because I really missed my colleagues and I was looking for something else a little bit. And I didn't feel like I could be an Indian classical dancer at Bharatanatyam in New York. My teacher came. I worked with Gene Erdman and Joseph Campbell at that time. I was a member of the Theater of the Open Eye, and I've been trained so much in modern dance, and they were more international. They were more open to a larger kind of viewpoint, and anyway, so I couldn't. I learned so much in India about ego and art and teaching and being a student and performing and not for ego sense but for the art. And so when it came back, it was in the 70s, late 70s, and dance world had undergone a bit of a change, and people were into pedestrian movement, less rigid movement. People were looking for, like, running, walking. Yvonne Rainer was there at that time, and well, I didn't get it. I left. It was one thing, and I came back. It was something else. And I met a teacher who his name was Alan Wayne, and he was a ballet dancer, and he sort of taught ballet. He wanted to teach people who had injuries who were from the ballet world, but he was the first person who ever named anything under the skin. I was already 28 years old, and for the first time I heard the word sternum, breastbone. I heard, and so there was this feeling of body work, and the idea that in dancing you could understand why you couldn't put your leg up. It was just beginning to have a vocabulary that wasn't just imitate me, and if you're not thin and you don't look like me, you're no good. So this was beginning to shift a little bit. It was, and this teacher was was fascinating to me. Very difficult person. I don't know how to explain, but very few people went to him and stuck with him because you had to trust him. He could put his hands down your throat and you'd have to relax, right? Because otherwise, yeah. And Meredith Monk went to him and learned a lot from him. But he was never really popular because he was so difficult as a person, as a personality. But so he kind of introduced me to the idea that there were other places in the body. But his way was just kind of a remedial thing. For me, that became the inspiration for why I moved and how I moved, and not doing 1 month of Graham and 2 months. I started to speak the body from him talking about, he'd say the word popliteal. I had no idea. I'd have to go find out about the knee. And, so I was ready for the shift because in India I had wiped out the former language. And this just grabbed me. Being a doctor's daughter, from the time I was born, people came to my houses with all kinds of baits and limps and, chairs and crutches. And I was always in this environment of watching bodies. And I'm sorry to go on and on, but this is a whole history. But anyway, that's where my beginning. I did a piece called Migrations, a dance through the body. And actually, first I did a solo for myself, where I would just take pieces of things. Like I would take the sternum and the shoulder blades, and I would just move, and then it would turn into like a bird, or and I would work until I was so exhausted I would fall down, and then look for another resource. I go, oh, the sacrum, and that would start to move. So I began investigating the body, and it's been 40 years, and I'm still doing that very thing.
It's really well put. And, usually I ask a few more questions before we get to this point, but it was just too intriguing. And I mean, you mentioned a lot of my heroes in that breath alone. So I just wanted to step back for a second. Did you do the James Joyce Finnegan's Wake play with Gene Erdman, Coaches Inside?
I was around then. I mean, they actually came right after that, but she had just done that. And yes, and she and Joe had a much more sort of like Ellen Stewart and La Mama, it's just my home where I work now a lot. They looked at the larger picture. Martha Graham looked at Japan and the Orient, as she used to call it, but more in a more exploitative way, I think. I don't need to say that, but I don't think she was going there to leave her sense and understand theirs. But Jean and Joe, you know, well, he was like a giant of a thinker, and uh, they invited my teacher to come here and perform with me, and that's that was part of it.
Quite remarkable, because in studying Finnegan's Wake for almost 30 years now, the cliche line, and I have to say it to you because I don't know if it's completely true, but you're there, that Joe carried around a copy of Finnegan's Wake. In 1939, the book comes out. 4 years later, he puts out a book that explains it, Skeleton Key. And she's like, you love that. Jean says, you love that book more than me. Let me see it. So she looks at it, finds the TV script in the movie, in the book, and turns it into a play, a dance theater piece. And she's more famous than Joe until he gets on Bill Moyers. Does that seem pretty accurate with that, the way I described that?
To me, knowing Joe, he was always very, very famous. And, he took up a lot of oxygen in the room. So he was always a very big presence. So, yeah, I think, they're a good example of cell to brain and brain to cell. I mean, they're a couple, they're the example, of what I try to do in my one body. He was the thinker. She was the artist, the bringing the expression to it. And she's a wonderful person. And who else would have welcomed me? I was sort of such an anomaly. I was a classical Indian dancer, and they knew what it was. They, because myths, anything. And I'm still to this day very influenced by Martha Graham's myths and Jean Erdman's, and the idea of folklore, the idea of community. So that was really fortuitous for me to get to her.
That was really good. And when you went into Alan Wayne, is it Wayne, Alan Wayne?
It is, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So these things will probably come back up. I'm just curious, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Yeah, I certainly can. I remember a lot of them because when I was 4, we went on the Ile-de-France, the big boat, and we sailed to France with my mother and my sister. There was a storm at sea. I mean, I have a lot of memories of that boat. Judy Garland was on that boat. Not that I would have noticed as a kid. I have lots of memories of that. But I decided at a certain age that I would memorize a moment. I actually did this when I was, I think I must have just turned 7, and I was roller skating, and I looked down and I said, oh, this is how tall I'll feel next year. And I realized time was passing, and I looked at a clock and I memorized a moment. I did it because I knew.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Oh, to me, it's a total blessing.
Yeah.
Whether it's good or bad memories, it's a total blessing.
In what you just talked about, memorizing the moment, when people talk about body memory, as opposed to they think memory is in your mind, how do you distinguish between it, especially in what you've already taught me? Is there a difference?
Well, if you ask me about memory, I'll tell you what color socks I'm wearing. Because I memorize like that. I remember in the feeling of it and in the visual. So so like, all right, wait, say your question again, because I've already gone somewhere.
I didn't really have a question per se. I was just asking how people say that's body memory.
Oh,
or
yes.
no, I'm sorry. They don't say body memory.
Stored
They
in the
say
body.
they say muscle memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do think that it's true. I think that if you look at every child, they have perfect alignment. They don't slump, right? They, every 2-year-old is sitting there proudly with their back perfect, and and so we all have that, and then we don't. And I think how we're shaped is based on events and what we've seen. It could be that we're taking the form of our mother who stooped, or we're putting on that uh, awarenesses, kind of like, I don't know, when they go, you stop, you're an idiot, and you feel like you're cowering, that stays, and you at some point you don't come up again. So then you've got your teenager and you're hunched over, and for me, body, it's all in the body. But I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes people say, well, where in the body is your anger? I mean, I could never tell you where in the body is my anger. I could tell you that when I move certain places, it brings up certain things.
Right.
It brings up images. So I know that things are stored, or images, or sometimes we work with cliches. And if you say to anybody, be a drunk, they're going to lurch around, and it's going to look very similar for everybody. It's kind of like that's an idea of being drunk that we store in the body. It's a physical state.
Yeah.
I think the body holds an enormous amount of knowledge and information and memory, because like I can remember feeling embarrassed at a certain age, being asked to do something. I can remember the feeling, and the feeling is a full body feeling.
Yeah.
It's a full body feeling. So I would
It,
say, yes, stored, definitely memories are stored in the body. But again, we use the mind to sort of point us in that direction. Like someone just yelled at us and we're 50, and then we go, oh, I remember that here,
yeah.
or yeah. Um,
So you've sort of covered this about your earliest role models within your immediate family and outside your immediate family. So you covered that so well. I'm going to skip that question, but did your parents raise you a particular religion?
well, it's funny. I just did a long interview about this. Um, we always thought of myself as Jewish, but my mother was not, did not believe in God. But she was Jewish, right? So we were sort of culturally Jewish through her. But she was not any type that you would know. She was Romanian Palestinian, my mother, which means she started out in Bessarabia and then she went to Palestine. And I just found she's not alive anymore, but I just found some documents where they said she was Romanian Palestinian. And I thought, I never thought of myself as being Palestinian, but there was no Israel in 1920,
Yeah.
in Palestine. And that's where she went. Um, and, so she didn't come from any shtetl or anything. She was brought up by governesses. She was an aristocrat. Her father was the doctor to the king, and so it was not your typical thing. With my father's side, it was a shtetl in Poland and Eastern Europe, and and the Holocaust and all that. So that's my father's side. So I think my father had great fears about identifying us as Jews. And so he himself just practiced what he did, and we did the holidays. which I do too. So, we did the Passover and the Hanukkah, and all about the food and the gathering and the relatives and presents and children and all that. And yeah, so only in the most cultural sense, but I have a long life, so I in my 40s I was working in Eastern Europe, uh, and just when the Soviet Union was falling, and I was working with ballet companies and and teaching and choreographing, and went to this little shtetl that was across the border from Lithuania in what's now Belarus, and I found out something that I hadn't known before, which was when I went to this little town, I was told there were 5 Jews left. I was told that 29 of my Rogoff relatives were murdered and were buried in that forest. I had never heard such a thing. Can you imagine being that age?
Wow.
And so I went back and I found that my father had visited there in 1935 and written a diary. And my father he was in World War II in the Merrill's Marauders, which was a kind of suicide unit. And and so I did a very large scale piece there I brought Frank London, who's from the Cosmatics, and he did the music, and I did it right on the gravesite, and it was not a Holocaust related piece, but it was done there. And that's a whole other story. And I have a website, and that film, it's called Summer in Ivia, Ivye, Summer in Ivia, and you can get the film. It went to the Hampton Film Festival. It had a little bit of a run, not as much Enter the Fawn as the other film. And so all my films are there, and you can get them. But yeah, so then I
Well,
did.
we list your website, and that's good because we're going to get into film very soon. But I was going to ask you, do you pray?
No, I wouldn't call it praying, but I do a really big wishing. I do a lot of wishing. I would do a lot of wishing, moving things around. From being in India, when you're in India, you are immersed in their culture. I mean, this is in the 1970s. And, I have a very primitive way of representing my family by different small objects that I move around and place and think about. Um, and so just such a mishmash. I guess you might call it praying.
Yeah.
There's no God involved.
Yeah.
Nature.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Yeah, let's say evil uses people as a vehicle. I would.
And this is the follow-up question is a little more detailed in that. How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob in The Samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Yeah.
JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. My basic question is how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you respond to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Well, I don't think I wouldn't go along with that, because just not being conscious does not work for me. Um, I mean, I think there's a lot of things that create somebody who is an enemy, and I'm in total mourning for the children that were killed. I haven't slept for 2 nights, and yeah, so you're getting a very interesting conversation. Because I'm very sleep deprived, but I feel like I have to, first of all, not thinking about who shot them right now. My first job is to feel empathetically their deaths, feel in my body, feel how it could be that my own 4 grandchildren could be in school. I have to do the feeling first. Once I've done the feeling, then I have the call to action.
Yeah.
And then I can know the facts, you know. But I don't want to know the facts before I've gone to the feeling, because then I don't know the value of the facts. And so that's how this is me. And so then then I can go all into the details about gun control and what I can do and where I can go and all that. And then there's this person, this deranged person. Now, I've worked in psychiatric hospitals like a lot of time, a lot of years, many years, and with schizophrenics, and I've done a lot of work in prisons. I spent 3 years working in a prison for 20 hours a week, which is not like dropping in to do a workshop. It's a long time. And so I think there's a responsibility that we have as a society for creating monsters. I mean, there can be aberrations. There can be, schizophrenia. There can be lots of things, but our society is in such a mess. It's so inequitable. It's so I spent time with killers. I spent time with, everybody from mail fraud, because I was working in a federal prison, and I was making dance work with the inmates, and so we're responsible. We're responsible. They don't just, they don't. Yeah, this idea of just how much we are graced with, if we have enough money, if we have, how we're empowered. There's so much that comes with not being on the poverty level. So I'm going on and on, but I it's not an enemy. I mean, there are people who it's not worth it for me to spend a lot of time with, because we're thinking on different planes, and there's so many wonderful people in the world that I need to make time for. So if I wouldn't call those enemies exactly, I've had to sometimes fire somebody from working on a piece. Very rarely, once or twice in my whole life. But it's just the idea that something didn't mesh.
Yeah. Learning conflict resolution is so important for our society, and it doesn't have to entail military. Conflict resolution can be acquired through various means. And so let's go to this. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, the way I get around that is I have so much of my work has, first of all, intergenerational. Second of all, often brings people to the stage who've never been there. Mixes, professionals and non-professionals. And a lot of it is site-specific, outside.
Yeah.
But there, as an artist, you feel like you can revisit something, make a way for people to hear it and see it differently, like things that they maybe wouldn't come in contact with. So when it's a plight of performers in New York, that how do you get an audience, right? Well, for me, I don't have that problem so much, because there are so many communities involved in the work I do, other than the professional dance community, that those communities come to the theater, and I guess storytelling is really ancient art, then it's very powerful, and we want to be told stories. Um, and I think after you've been told a story, you can maybe, if you haven't been noticing trees and the story is about trees, you'll go out and you'll notice some trees, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it's responsibility of the artist to land somewhere where the audience can uh, be with them and understand that this isn't just some abstraction where someone's lifting their leg. You know, I always have reality. Reality is in all my performances. So the last film, On the Streets, you know, I included the the restaurateur, the woman who runs the Italian restaurant. She let us use it. I do like a lot of community-based site work. So basically, I'm putting my own teachers. I say it this way: I'm putting my teachers in my work. By putting what I'm looking for, I put sort of experts in. So when I did the piece about the Holocaust, there were 5 Holocaust survivors in the piece, along with the most famous actor in all of Lithuania, like, and very, very, very famous dancers and actors, and the survivors and all the children of the town, lots of children. So it's a mishmash of that,
Yeah.
and the so that the actors know how to block a scene. You know, anyway, it's not on stage; we're in the forest, and their job is to do that for the person who doesn't know that as a trade, so they don't have to think about that. They just, I would never have been able to do a piece about the Holocaust if they were not in it, keeping me feeling entitled to be there, you know, to tell the story because it's their story. But I wasn't telling the Holocaust story. I was telling the story I was telling was about a girl who finds out about this. It's my own story. My 16-year-old daughter played the girl who jumps over the Holocaust, the memorial, and goes into the past and just gets to visit the town as it was when it was a Jewish town. So I mix it all up, and I'll often have autobiographical things like people will know. Well, the real thing is she's really doing it. We're really walking through these scenes on the same path that the Jews marched to their death. So that's an understory. That's really her daughter that's an understory, but everybody seems to know it, you know.
Yeah.
So those are the things. You don't have to say everybody look at a tree, but you just put a few dancers in trees and the trees become so much. You know that those trees were there witnessing, and maybe something in their rings changed during those few hours of massacre.
That's good. Do artists have moral obligation?
I have an obligation. If I'm an artist, it's a privilege. It's a privilege to me. Um, One, I have an obligation to perfect my instrument, my art form, um, to work really hard on my work. I have an obligation to put out something that's been really worked. Um, that's not more that is in a way, and what effect it has. I am teaching myself first and foremost something in the work that I'm doing. But the way I go about it, it's a shared learning process, and I'm looking for the connection between people a lot. And so I do feel, I don't feel a moral obligation to do my work, but I feel in my work when I do it, a moral obligation to connect, to be populist enough that people don't need to have read Phineas Wake or whatever, that my work, that my work will be present for them on some level. I was not saying I shouldn't read it or, and use it and think it. And that's what I'm talking about, really working on something. But the visceral thing about performance has to be that the audience is with you. You don't command their thoughts, but you give them the stimulus to take them on the journey that has been bringing you knowledge.
Really well put. Because I want to interject Ruth Draper's quote that I ask people about often. The key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in the way of imagination and creative power. Sounds great, but how do you do that?
Well, I often just have one row. Like I'll often do pieces. There's no back row. So it's just one huge, I'll do a clover leaf of 120 people and have things happen. So everybody is very close because I'm directing from the first, I'm always directing from here. And then there, I want everybody to see it from where I'm directing it. So you can do that with film, but with live shows, the audience, I like when the audience sees the other side of the audience. So,
Yeah.
so we're very aware because we're a few inches performing. We're a few inches from them, and there's so. I mean, I do proscenium pieces as well, but not as much. So I'm always looking for, like the last piece I did in 2017, before my piece in 2020 got shut down for COVID. The audience sat around beds, 4 different beds. So there were 25 people around each bed. And then what happened in the bed changed. The performers moved. Earlier, my first bed piece in the 1980s, the audience moved from bed to bed because I wanted the audience very active and choosing where they wanted to sit and very much a part of it. Um,
No, that is beautiful what you do, and I'm curious about your switch over to getting into film, and I wanted to open it with a screenwriting teacher told me a great film or great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great film or great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. Just walk us through how you got the tipping point and when you said, I want to pursue film also, and your intention in creating film, in your creative process, making films. What role does intention play?
well, I sort of fell into filmmaking very backwards. Um, you know, that piece in Eastern Europe, uh, in the forest, it got tons of for 3 weeks. Buses came from Minsk, from Leningrad. People just came to see this, but I knew that it would vanish, and I wanted to film it, and because we were in Eastern Europe in this tiny little dirt road town, so that was the reason for wanting to film it, and um,
To preserve it historically, but did you have a sense in your mind and your upbringing, I sort of want to be a filmmaker? I mean, what was that?
no, I didn't, and so, but what happened was, I didn't feel that recreating the piece on camera would work. So I made a documentary of the work where all the people in it spoke, and so it's a documentary. It's not the performance because I
Right.
don't think you can really do that. And I sat with the editor and then began to learn and understand. I mean, I understood we had so much footage because I gave it. Everybody had cameras. We had so much footage, and Daisy Wright, she is an amazing editor, and she ended up being co-director. And I was just fascinated, but not motivated enough to think of myself as a filmmaker. And then again, when I was working with Greg Mosgala on Enter the Fawn, we were in the studio and we were working because he had cerebral palsy, and when there's usually no progress with cerebral palsy, so everybody sort of gives up and does terrible things to the kids when they're little. And um, we were making phenomenal progress, phenomenal. And I thought, there's nobody going to believe me. Nobody's going to believe me. So I do my own camera. And then right at that moment, I got a Guggenheim, and that Guggenheim grant became a Guggenheim Fellow. They gave me $50,000, and I said, okay. I hired filmmakers. This is where those granting things can really help. And in over a year, they followed me around and him around in the performance and after. And that I still wasn't really directing because I was in it. So it was more like I would say to the camera, the cinematographer, just do it. I had 5 different, and I didn't really understand about, I would just get lots of footage and then I would be editing. And what was lucky for me was that Daisy had worked with me again, and we thought we were finished, but we went to this film thing, and Sundance invited us to be part of their labs. Now, Sundance labs are the most blessed thing in the world in terms of learning, someone who hasn't gone to film school. And I thought, well, we're 90% finished. They'll just help us a little. Well, we were 10% finished according to them, And so back to square one. And they supported it. They pushed it. They pushed us. I think to this day, I'm an alumni, so I get to go to bring, to roundtables and be in the community. So that pushed me into some real kind of understanding of the process. And that film, I would say maybe 12 million people have seen it or more. Because it was on PBS. It was so, and then I would get a lot of responses back, and so and then came COVID, where there really wasn't a choice, and I made 2 films during COVID. So I still I'm a very beginning filmmaker. I'm not trying to make my first fiction film. Well, I did, but very beginning. I understand documentary better than I understand anything else. But there's something really magical in film and something really magical about stage work. So I don't know if I'm going to go back and forth. As I think in imagery, I have to see what's what. But right now, what I'm working on is the language that I have from talking and listening to my body for all these years. I have actually had conversations with all these parts of my body. And so I'm writing a script from their point of view. No. And it's kind of crazy, but
that's beautiful.
This is my language, and it's not anybody else's language that I know of.
It's really beautiful what you've progressed into, and you morphed into film. But I'm curious, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much do you think of your audience when you're creating your dance piece, your sight piece, and your film piece? How much do you think of your audience while you're making?
Completely. I mean, I completely think of them. Yeah. Everything I do, I think of them receiving from where they're going to be in the room. What I think of them. I have to be really careful before a show not to go out and say, if anybody has to go to the bathroom, go now. I'm thinking about my audience. Now, I once had to do that because the bathroom was back of the stage and they would have to walk across the stage, offs. And, no, I completely make it as a connection. What I do is I make it so personal and I reveal so much and I go so deep that I believe that universalizes what I'm saying because of the depth and who I put in the piece. And it doesn't exist without the audience, and it's done for them. And and the winner, I mean, I'm the winner because I get to do my own process and open my notebooks every day and write in my notebooks. This is, what I love. And they are the most important. They're very important. I don't understand. I really don't understand how. I've heard artists say, I do my work for myself, and I don't care if they don't like it or they like it. I really care.
What do That's beautiful. What do you think the motive of the cave artist was? And it's an amazing thing. We don't really have cave dance documented, but we can imagine what it was. We don't have cave music documented. So it usually gets shoved into this one category, cave art, because we happen to have some of this stuff that's lasted so many years. But just in general, what do you think the motive of the cave artist was, whether they were doing dance music or, you know, cave drawings?
I think to connect with the spirit of the animal that they're drawing or what they're drawing. I mean, I think that you're connecting with your ancestors, no matter what animal it is or what if it's a person. You're always, always, always connecting with your ancestors. You're always carrying all the generations with you. And when you can make it real, when you can put it out there and look at the beauty and know your connection to it. If you drew it, you were it. You know
Yeah.
that. You know, and that reverence for. I think they revered the world of nature, and so I think that's in our brain that
Yeah.
we do imagery. We make an image. You
Well,
know.
you brought up storytelling, and Hollis Frampton said narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. Can you forget to die?
Well, I was before you said that. I love that quote. Um, Wait, so knowing me, I have to go. I love the first part of that quote. Um, and by the way, when I was looking for a narrative for this language that I'm creating, I thought it could be a woman dying, saying goodbye to her body. So I lay down on my couch. I worked on it, and I understood I didn't belong there. I said, "Let's get out of here. This is too frightening." There are certain processes that you're not part of, and you shouldn't be there. So then I said, "Okay, well, make the piece about a woman rehearsing her death." And then I said, "Nah, no, let's go somewhere else." My death is often my subject, and whether let's go somewhere else. But Jerry, say again
The
the beginning.
Hollis Frampton quote is narrative is born among the animal necessity of the spirit because we are waiting to die.
Yeah. So I understand that. Yeah. So if you're facing death, which I did quite a bit, um, the most important thing was what had I told that went somewhere that will be there when I die. So there's the four grandchildren that I have, each one very different. Um, One of them is coming over tonight to do what we call a faux mitzvah. I don't call it a faux mitzvah. My son thinks that's funny. I call it a real mitzvah, and his name is Finn, so we're doing a Finn mitzvah. And what this is, both my children married people who are not Jewish, and they have no connection other than me to Judaism. So Finn is Irish and Jewish, and he's going to come over, and he missed the age of 13 when you usually do this coming of age thing. And it started with the oldest grandchild who said, "No, I want to do something." And I will show him the film of Summer in India, which he doesn't know anything about because I didn't know. No one knows. You don't tell the children, and children don't ask, and they miss a lot. So we'll watch that. We'll talk about. There'll be like 16 people there. There'll be a big challah bread, which we'll have the candles in it, and he'll choose if he wants artichoke pizza or whatever he wants. And he's a very interesting kid. And from the first one, so in other words, I'm designing something. What I did with the first one, then the second one wanted to do it. Now the third one wanted to do it, and the fourth one. And so when I'm gone, they're going to do it.
Yeah.
If they don't do it, they're going to metamorphosize it into something else. So if I'm going to die, I know that in these four beautiful souls connected to me are the stories I've told them, the myths I've given them, the food I've cooked for them, the special times we spent together. And honestly, I can die.
Yeah.
I've actually already done. I've done it. I don't want to die, and there's still a lot to do. The youngest one would just turn 9, so there's that sense of you're not dying.
Yeah.
Your body's gone, but they're going to. I mean, my grandmother name is Cuckoo. That's so I'm Cuckoo, and it's so endearing because I used to go cuckoo, go cuckoo. I think of it as French, very French. That's what they call me, and a lot of my kids' friends call me cuckoo. It's a known. It's. I've also the films make a difference because they stay in the world.
Yeah. No, it's
And
really beautiful. What's more important, conviction or compromise?
I think compromise.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I think. Who cares about your conviction if you know he's listening? It's got to be compromised. I'm not big on conviction. I'm big on maybe this might be true, but let me see. Maybe it's true. I don't know. Conviction, like what anyway, you got my.
Did you get that? No, I love it because there's no right or wrong answers to any of these questions, but that one you got right. But did you get that more from the way your parents raised you or more on your own?
I got that from the way my parents raised me, because I would use a different word. My parents had a sense of contributing to the world with what they had and what they knew.
Yeah.
And it was passion. There was a passion. Definitely passion is a word that I agree with. And it's a privilege to have a passion and to know what your passion is and to care passionately. And I saw them do that. And also, I saw them open to so many ideas and so many people. I'm probably the only kid in the world who in the 50s had a great deal of older people, friends who were gay. I mean, in the 50s, it was unusual. And my parents had a lot of friends who were artists, and I spent a lot of time with them. And I think that, I think it comes from Paris, and then you reinvent it with your generation and who you're giving it to. And, recognizing another person's individuality is so important. And if you get too much conviction, you don't see.
Yeah.
You're stuck. You're very stuck.
Yeah. You've accomplished a lot. Could you rate these 3 elements, luck, skill, and ambition? What played the biggest role, second and third, in your accomplishments?
Okay, wait. So luck,
skill,
and ambition might be last. Luck first. Luck and skill, luck, always luck first, because you got to be in a position, where luck, skill, and ambition.
Beautiful. T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
Well, you know the answer. The body. My inner dialogue is in the body.
Yeah.
It's but it really is. You see, because I'll find what the dialogue is once I set the body into motion. I'll be listening, and there'll be a story.
Yeah. So 2 of my film heroes, George Manupelli said, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas said, there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So I know it's a stupid question and it depends, and I'm just getting your hunch or your ideas on this. Is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever culture, technology, or environments are dominant?
I'm a vehicle.
Yeah.
I'm a vehicle. I'm a vehicle, and I want to be a vehicle. And I learned that in India. I'm a respectful vehicle. I'm a, you know, uh, I'm a certain model of car. I'm a vehicle, and I think that that's where your audience comes in. You're carrying something to them from somewhere and to them, and maybe from a lot of places. But you're a vehicle to the audience.
Can
And
art
yeah,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
Can art making be egoless?
Yeah, it can be egoless. I mean, it can be egoless in the making stage, in that notebook stage. Egoless in the sense, not of, I mean, everything I do is so autobiographical and is very linked. So when I say egoless, I mean apart from ambition or, the other thing that used to happen to me when I rented those studios and did the Martha Grahams, I would sort of hear the critics, what the critics might say, and then in the Village Voice at the time, you know. So for me, the egoless part, came out of being an Indian classical dancer, where the material is the same material everybody's been dancing. It's nothing like, this isn't like original. The thing is what you bring through it. It's modeled to bring your spirit and through it, and how much of it can you bring through it. And there you do step aside, um, in terms of your individuality. At the end, everybody's clapping, an hour performance you just did, and your teacher comes out and takes a bow, not you. So in India, I really learned about that. But ego is not the word that I would say that I would put ego, that word, aside.
Yeah. Listen, you've really gotten what I'm after, and I really appreciate your time. We got about 15 more minutes, and I really appreciate this. You taught me so much. And the next question is perception reality?
Yeah, each person's perception is their reality.
Yeah. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Oh, okay. Um, well, I was never very verbal, and that it became a kind of strength because my language had to be in the body. But later on, I had to talk about my work, and I had to learn to also speak about my work. And then I began to put words in my work. And now I will often there'll be, talking, which is in dance work is, it's pretty common now. But I will mostly with my dancers ask them to focus on their weakest point, because one wants to see what a dancer doesn't do easily. It's much more interesting. You can see the depth of where the movement originates in their striving for it. So
Yeah.
anybody can lift their leg to the sky. I don't have them lift their leg. I'm not interested. It's disembodied already. So that feeling of trying to do something you call a weakness, is what I'm after in all my work.
I love that because it leads perfectly into this. This word striving is beautiful. Louis Buñuel said, I'm for anyone who seeks the truth, but I part ways when they claim they found it.
Yes, I
The
agree.
the cliche is that the journey is more important than the destination. Why do we have to name a destination or seek a destination if the journey is more important?
Yeah. I mean, for me, if someone in the audience recognizes themselves. Empathy is very important for me. Empathy and and connection. And I feel that would be what this planet needs, a sense of empathy. And so for me, it's not a didactic thing that I'm going to teach somebody something. And this is, but I'm going to make people, if I can, inspire them to feel something. You'd be surprised how many people don't feel. That's enough, that they feel something and they come to look at something differently. Like I'll often, whenever I do love scenes, I'll do it usually between two men or two women, or something that maybe not anymore, but long ago was a sort of, I did a piece with 9 babies in the arms of their fathers and mothers. A lot of them were dancers, a lot of them weren't. I called it Sleeping Beauties. But the main was about 2 men, and it was about during the AIDS epidemic. A lot of my friends died, and I saw men nurturing other men within their deathbeds. And I was like, this is a crazy thing, maternal instinct, that it's a woman's. And so I did this piece, and I put the babies in to disarm everybody. Because, everybody was like there with the babies. And because they were carried around and they're part of everything. And then when their hearts are really like open, because everybody loves baby, I did the scene between the 2 men. This is in the 1990s. So it wasn't that it needs to be original or revolutionary, but when they kiss, people have to understand it's that same man is kissing the baby, and you accept it. And so you got that, and then now you see that same man is kissing this other man. So all I want is that human connection, that intimacy that brings that empathy and understanding. That so I would agree. There's no didactic thing going on.
We need that. And Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
Impossible things of thinking. Well, there's daydreaming, but I often think, that this generation now growing up, that they're going to fix the world. I think this is my my wish, and I see that their motive, like the ones that I've come in contact, the 18, 19-year-olds. Yeah, I kind of want to believe that they're all going to do it.
Yeah. What's the cultural shift developing today that inspires you?
Oh, the whole movement towards gender equality, and that really inspires me. I only wish I was 7 now and I could not have to wear the girl dresses and do what. I feel like this is a revolution. This is an amazing thing. So there's that, and that people are becoming more aware of political things, Black Lives Matter, and well, I think that those are revolutionary. Well, I wouldn't have thought that was possible long ago, and
Yeah.
somehow it is, and that's my responsibility as an artist, to use what is there in my work, to have always an exclusive cast, the opposite, an inclusive cast, to have people. My casts are very inclusive. You'll have people, performers using wheelchairs. You'll have, everybody's there.
No, I've
And
seen inclusivity is beautiful. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I would say you have a voice. And I would say you have a voice, and don't be afraid if it's yours. You know, I think I had a great deal of pressure to please everybody. A lot of little girls did then, and and I knew that I had deep thoughts, and I would say just, be proud of who you are and don't buy all the bullshit. Just don't. But you have to go through Martha Graham in order to get rid of Martha Graham. So what could you say?
Yeah. Well, that's you really typify, or you really illustrate, Harold Bloom's all search for the anxiety of influence, and how some people say you have to absorb your influence and then abandon them. And I think the way you have articulated this is really a good example of that, because you know what you're doing, but then you've somehow found a way to search a new way and like flip it, so that, it's like turning a breakdown into a breakthrough, or a rejection into a redirection. I'm curious, as we close out, what's one major thing in your creativeness that stayed the same, and one major element that's changed in the years you've been creative?
Well, the 1 minute that I memorized stayed the same. That's still me. And so that's one thing that stays. And you asked what was the second part of the question?
One thing that stayed the same and one thing that's changed.
Yeah, so really what stayed the same was my rapport with my own emotional self. Um, and and putting that out into an art form. Even when I was little, I did that. What's and something that's changed over the years. Well, the idea of working on something, that it's not sacred as it comes to you the first moment. I always, like, 90% of my work is right there, and then the next 10% I have to work for, because I have a vision, but then that last 10% is the most important thing. And so I guess I've learned that what I feel and think is not sacred, the first thing, and that I can be influenced in a lot of directions, and it'll still be mine. And yeah, and the more I abandon, like, the more I clean the slate. But I've always thought this. I've always thought my every piece is my first piece. Um, so yeah, I think the confidence. I got rid of not being confident enough, or comparing myself to other people. Um, I really can't compare myself to other people. It's really stupid, because it's not fruitful. Um, but I can be very rigorous in how I look at what I do.
Yeah. It's like, Igor Stravinsky said, most people don't know what they like what they know. And spending this time with you, it seems as I really think you're a visionary. You do know what you like, but you're also open to this inclusivity, and including everyone. People don't think, oh, I'm going to use handicapped people in my art. They don't think that. And somehow I think it goes back to your dad holding the hand of the patient. I mean, that will never erase my mind. My mom was a nurse, and I wish she could experience that, what you told me. But just in closing, and again, I really thank you, this has been touching. Thornton Wilder said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Any comment on that thought?
I don't care. I don't relate much, because it's not. Intimacy is really important. Honesty is really important. Connecting to people is really important. So that sounds very manipulative to me. It sounds like you're manipulating. Um, I'm not
But
hiding
it's
anything.
interesting. How do you gauge authenticity? How do you like, I don't know if gauge is the right verb, but how do you sense truth?
By putting those people in the work that know something different than me and making sure that they're heard. And the thing about working with somebody who's using a wheelchair is I then have to make the leap because I don't understand that body. And they have to make the leap towards me. So it's that, yeah, it's that, it's that going towards what you don't know and what is really hard for you is always what the next step is for me,
Yeah.
and
See,
so
yeah, McLuhan's line was, "You mean my whole fallacy is wrong?" It's you do have some sense though, and it's one word I always try to figure out and never really understand is vulnerable. Is that play?
oh, very big
Yeah.
role for me, because I think it is our vulnerabilities that make us human and make us connect. And yes, vulnerability is very, very important. I mean, yes, you could watch, that's why I would never be interested in doing a piece with 26-year-old in perfect shape, 10,
Yeah.
26. What, this is not taking me anywhere. I mean, I could really
You
take
could do it, but where did your I'll just close out with this question. Usually my last question is what gives you the most optimism. So you can incorporate that. But what does courage mean to you? What's your courage and your risk in doing that rooted in? Because that takes courage to do that. Like you could go get 26 great dancers and do a great dance piece, but that takes courage. What is the root of your courage?
But for me, it doesn't take courage.
Oh, I see.
It doesn't. To me, that is what my process is, and
Yeah.
I, what is courageous? Let's see. Um, that I think has to do with the authenticity too. Is it's not courageous. It's interesting. It's fascinating. I'm led by what fascinates me that I don't know that I need to know.
Yeah.
At some moment, there's something I need to know to be a person in this world. I need to know. And it might be something that goes back to the war and my father. It might be something that goes to a community, that's been incarcerated. There's something I need to know, and this is the only way I'll know it. So that's just to me vulnerable. And I feel like vulnerability, when I sit down in a seat to watch a performance, I am vulnerable. I sit there waiting. I don't start judging. I don't, and that's why I put children in the work a whole lot. And that's why, my first awareness was as a child, memorizing the moment. And I think children on stage help a lot with the vulnerability because people make way for that for some reason, it's in the genes to nurture. So yeah, I never feel like I need to be courageous. I
Yeah.
just I feel like I need sometimes to be loud and make myself known and ask for things. I have to ask for theaters. I have to ask for money. I have to be um, sure of myself. But I'm not
Beautiful.
courageous.
I'm gonna ask the last question anyways. Thank you so much again. I really appreciate your time and energy. What gives you the most optimism?
I just saw a wonderful play about something about the something about the belief in God. I can't remember the title exactly, but I just wept after it. I think my optimism. I mean, from the time I was a tiny girl, I used to say people are good, and I've learned, that's not that simple. But everybody loves their babies. Everybody, you know, Every criminal loves their babies. There's something in us that does connect. I'm not talking about the 10 people who are so aberrant that, you know. So I have to put my faith in the fact that people do love other people.
Yeah.
And in that it's never going to be perfect. I just want the planet to continue long enough so that we can continue to make small progress. And I worry about it being over. It doesn't feel possible to me, but my optimism is in, you know, my grandson who's studying economics because he knows that he's studying environmental stuff and economics, that it's only going to work if some people make money. You know, he's figured, he's got his approach, but it's taking into account what could happen, and it's in his hands. It's not in my hands. So from there, you know, and knowing that, yeah, it's just, I think it's something in me. I'm optimistic. I've watched a lot of things come and go. I've watched, you know, we're going to have a cure for AIDS. We have a cure already. It's not happening so fast, but I've seen progress. And like what you said, you know, about gender and sexuality and these things, this is progress. Civil rights, there's been some progress. Not enough. I don't know. I just, you know, I just look at the sky and say, let it continue. Look at the ocean. It's very, you know, I have an optimistic soul, but I don't really want to be naive. And the ocean is very important to me. And the ocean can have a red tide and it can stink. And I've never had that my whole life. It's things that are horrific now that are beyond what I've ever known. And just have to have an idea that there's enough people who can get together and make something work.
Yeah. Well, this has really worked well. Thank you. I agree. This has really worked well. I thank you so much for your time and energy, and a big kudos to Flash for introducing us. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, I hope our dialogue can continue on and on. Thank you so much.
All right. So long. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you. Bye.
It was fun to meet you.
Nice to talk. Thanks.